Imagine you are standing on the bridge of a 10,000-ton steel freighter. You are surrounded by reinforced glass and modern technology. Radar screens glow green in front of you. Satellite navigation systems hum quietly overhead. Every instrument on this bridge is telling you the same thing. You are on course. You are on schedule. Everything is working exactly the way it was designed to work. But then you look up from the screens and you look out the window. And what you see makes every single one of those instruments irrelevant. A wall of dark, freezing water, taller than a 4-story building, is rising out of the blackness and curling toward you. It does not look like a wave. It looks like the ocean has decided to stand up. And in that moment, your brain does something it has never done before. It accepts that steel can bend, that glass can shatter, that everything the engineers promised you about this ship might be a lie. The wave hits. The sound is not what you expected. It is not a splash. It is a detonation. A deep, structural boom that vibrates through the deck plates and up through your boots and into your teeth. The entire bridge lurches sideways. Coffee mugs fly off the console and explode against the far wall. The helmsman grabs the wheel with both hands and his knees buckle. And for 3 full seconds, you are not standing on the floor. You are standing on the wall. Then the ship rolls back. The next wave is already building. It is bigger than the last one. You are at the very bottom of the earth, in a body of water that has, by some estimates, swallowed more than 800 ships, and claimed upward of 20,000 lives. This is the Drake Passage, and it does not care that you are here. Most people hear the word passage, and they picture something manageable. A corridor, a shortcut, a gap between two things that you slip through and move on. The word itself is a kind of lie, but the Drake Passage is not a corridor. It is a 600-mile-wide collision zone, where 3 of the planet's largest oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Southern Ocean, converge into one violent, uninterrupted current. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, it stretches from the southern tip of South America at Cape Horn down to the South Shetland Islands, just north of the Antarctic Peninsula. 600 miles of open water. No islands in between. No harbor to duck into if the weather turns. Nothing but raw, unbroken ocean in every direction. To cross it takes roughly 2 days by ship. 2 days in which there is nowhere to hide and nothing to do but hold on and hope the physics work out in your favor. And that is only the surface. Beneath it, the average depth plunges to roughly 11,000 feet. In some areas, according to oceanographic surveys, it drops to nearly 15,000 feet. That is almost 3 miles of freezing black water beneath your hull. If this ship sank right now, it would take the wreckage the better part of an hour to drift down through the darkness and settle on the bottom. And no one would ever find it. But the depth is not what makes this place deadly. It is what moves through it. There is an ocean current that circles the entire continent of Antarctica. It is the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, known as the ACC. It literally circles the continent. Every other major ocean current on the planet eventually runs into a continent. It hits land, and the land forces it to turn, to slow down, to redirect. The ACC hits nothing. It has been hitting nothing for millions of years. Researchers at IFREMER, the French Oceanographic Institute, say it is the strongest ocean current on the planet, precisely because no landmass interrupts it. It just keeps going, around and around the entire continent of Antarctica, driven by relentless westerly winds that sailors have called the Roaring Forties and the Furious Fifties for centuries. Those names are not metaphors. At these latitudes, between 40 and 60 degrees south, The wind blows with a consistency and a fury that has no equivalent anywhere else on Earth. There is simply nothing in the way, just open ocean all the way around the Earth, and the wind screams across it without interruption, without pause, without mercy. Now it gets terrifying. Britannica reports the ACC pushes about 134 million cubic meters of water per second. Some studies cited by Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory put that number as high as 182 million cubic meters per second. To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of approximately 5,000 Amazon rivers flowing through one channel at the same time. 5,000 Amazons. The Amazon is the largest river on Earth by volume, and you would need 5,000 of them running side by side to match what the ACC moves through the Drake Passage. Every second. According to EFRIMA researchers, that makes it a flow rate 100 times greater than all the rivers on the planet combined. And the Drake Passage is where all of that water gets squeezed, because the Drake is the narrowest point on the ACC's entire 25,000 kilometer loop around Antarctica. Think of it like pinching a garden hose. 600 miles sounds wide, until you realize the current itself spans up to 2,000 kilometers everywhere else. When it hits the Drake, the water accelerates, the pressure builds, and the surface erupts. Waves in the Drake Passage commonly reach 40 feet. That is the height of a 4-story building. 40 feet is not the exception, it is the average in a serious storm. Some maritime sources report rogue waves reaching significantly higher, though exact measurements are extremely difficult to verify, because the instruments often do not survive the waves they are trying to measure. In the Drake, the waves are steep, close together, and they come from multiple directions at once, because the current, the wind, and the seafloor are all pushing water in different ways. The ship does not rock. It lurches, it drops, it slams. Everything that is not bolted down becomes a projectile. But the waves alone are not what kills ships here. It is what happens beneath them. The ocean floor in the Drake Passage is not flat. It is a jagged landscape of ridges, seamounts, and fracture zones, shaped by millions of years of tectonic activity. A detailed bathymetric study, published in the Journal of Maps, describes seafloor features including the Shackleton Fracture Zone, submerged spreading ridges, and sharp transitions between the continental shelf and the deep abyssal plain. When the ACC's massive flow hits these sudden changes in depth, the water has nowhere to go but up. That interaction between current, wind, and seafloor is one of the mechanisms that researchers say contributes to the formation of rogue waves. A study from the Russian Academy of Sciences noted that rogue waves in the Drake Passage can emerge from dispersive focusing, where multiple wave components traveling at different speeds converge at the same point, at the same time, into one massive, almost vertical wall of water. The characteristic lifespan of one of these waves is approximately 2 minutes. It appears from nowhere. It towers above the rest of the sea state. Then it is gone. That is all the time you have to survive it. If you do not survive it, nobody saw it coming, and nobody will see it leave. Now you might be thinking, sure, this was dangerous for wooden sailing ships, but we have modern engineering now. We have steel hulls, satellite weather forecasting, and stabilizer systems. We are past this. We are not past this. And this is important, so stay with me here, because the physics do not care what century you were born in. There is a phenomenon in naval architecture called hogging and sagging. It is the reason that even the largest, most modern ships on Earth are not immune to the ocean. A ship's hull is essentially a giant steel beam, sometimes over 1,000 feet long. In calm water, the weight of the ship pushes down, and the buoyancy pushes up, and those forces are roughly balanced along the entire length. But in heavy seas, that balance disappears. If a wave crest passes directly beneath the middle of the ship, the center gets pushed up while the bow and stern droop under their own weight. That is called hogging. The ship bends upward in the middle, like a banana. Now flip it. If the ship is straddling two wave crests, one under the bow and one under the stern, the middle is suspended over the trough with no water beneath it. The center sags downward under thousands of tons of its own weight. That is called sagging. And if the wave is roughly the same length as the ship, the stress on the hull reaches its absolute maximum. According to naval engineering sources, these bending stresses can be severe enough to snap a ship completely in half. And this is not theoretical. In 2013, a container ship called the MOL Comfort, a modern vessel only 5 years old and over 1,000 feet long, broke completely in half in heavy seas in the Indian Ocean. According to reports, the hull failed due to excessive longitudinal bending stress after hogging. The ship cracked at midship. The stern section sank within 10 days. The bow section caught fire and sank shortly after. All 26 crew members were rescued, but the ship, along with over 7,000 shipping containers, was gone. A modern ship, built at the Nagasaki shipyard in Japan, 5 years old, 1,000 feet long, snapped like a pencil. Now imagine that same physics in the Drake Passage, where the waves come from multiple directions, twisting the hull laterally while bending it longitudinally. The bow goes one direction, the stern goes another, and the steel in between does the only thing it can do. It bends. And if it bends enough, it breaks. On December 7th, 2010, a cruise ship called Clelia II was returning from Antarctica through the Drake Passage with 88 American passengers and 77 crew members on board. According to reports from the Associated Press, the ship encountered sustained 30 to 40 foot seas, with winds reaching 55 miles per hour. One wave reached up to the 5th deck. It ripped a handrail off the exterior and flung it straight into the bridge windshield, shattering the reinforced glass. The impact knocked out the ship's communications and its radar. The Clelia II was reduced to a single engine. No radar. No way to call for help. One engine. In the Drake Passage. At night. In 40-foot seas. For a period of time, the ship, carrying 165 people in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth, was limping blind through the darkness. The nearby National Geographic Explorer diverted to shadow the Clelia II until she limped into port in Ushuaia, Argentina, 2 days later. Everyone survived, but everyone also learned the same lesson. The Drake does not respect your ship class. And then, 12 years later, it happened again. On November 29th, 2022, the Viking Polaris, a modern expedition cruise ship with an ice-class hull and stabilizer systems, was crossing the Drake Passage, heading toward Ushuaia, Argentina. The ship was already dealing with an emergency. The day before, a passenger had been injured in a Zodiac accident in Antarctica, and the Viking Polaris was making an unscheduled run back to port for a medical evacuation. They could not wait for a weather window. They had to go now. According to Norway's Accident Investigation Board, the ship was struck by a breaking wave just southeast of Cape Horn. The wave shattered the windows of 7 passenger cabins. Freezing seawater and broken glass exploded into the rooms. According to the investigation report, the impact felt to passengers on board like the ship had struck an iceberg. One American passenger, a 62-year-old woman, was killed. 8 others were injured. The investigation concluded something chilling. The windows on the Viking Polaris met every current maritime design standard. But those standards, according to the Norwegian investigators, did not account for the force of breaking waves striking the side of a ship. The investigators stated that no existing maritime rules had been identified for ship windows that account for the effect of breaking waves hitting a vessel's side. The rules that governed how strong those windows needed to be were written for a version of the ocean that does not exist in the Drake Passage. The engineering was fine, the regulations were fine, and the Drake Passage broke the rules themselves. Now, if you think the modern stories are unsettling, the historical record is something else entirely. The first European believed to have encountered the Drake Passage was a Spanish navigator named Francisco de Hoces. In 1525, his ship was blown far south of Cape Horn during a storm, and he stumbled into this open expanse of violent water entirely by accident. He survived. But the passage is not named after him. It is named after the English privateer Sir Francis Drake, who sailed through the same waters decades later in 1578. For the next 3 centuries, the Drake Passage became one of the most feared stretches of water in the age of sail. Before the Panama Canal opened in 1914, any ship traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans had to go around Cape Horn, and that meant crossing the Drake. Sailors called it rounding the Horn. They also called Cape Horn by another name, Cape Stiff. Those who survived the rounding earned the right to wear a gold earring in their left ear and to dine with one foot on the table, traditions that marked them as men who had faced the worst the ocean could offer and lived. The conditions were almost beyond imagination. Temperatures dropped well below freezing. The wind blew with such force that the seas never settled. Not for an hour, not for a minute. The ship rolled 40 degrees to port, then 40 degrees to starboard, over and over, for days and sometimes weeks. Captain William Bligh, the same man who would later become famous for the mutiny on the Bounty, attempted to round Cape Horn in 1788. According to historical accounts, he tried for 4 straight weeks, and then he gave up. He turned the Bounty around and sailed east, adding 10,000 nautical miles to his voyage by going the long way around the Cape of Good Hope instead. 10,000 extra miles because the Drake would not let him through. The full-rigged ship, Susanna, holds what may be the most agonizing record in maritime history. In 1905, she attempted to round Cape Horn from east to west. It took her 99 days, more than 3 months of hell, just to cross one passage. And the human cost of these crossings was staggering. First-hand accounts from Cape Horn sailors describe conditions that sound less like a sea voyage and more like a slow execution. Ice formed on the rigging, coating the ropes and the canvas sails in a thick, frozen shell that could add tons of weight to the masts. One account from a sailor aboard the Garthsnade, one of the last British square-rigged sailing ships, described climbing the masts in total darkness while the ship rolled violently beneath him. The canvas, he said, was soaked through, frozen, and hard as iron. The men would spread themselves along the yard arm, lying on their stomachs on the foot ropes, 80 or 90 feet above the deck, trying to wrestle the frozen sail with bare, frostbitten hands. They could not wear gloves. Gloves made it impossible to grip the canvas, so they climbed with bare hands, in freezing temperatures, in total darkness, on a mast that was swinging back and forth above a deck buried in white water. And the worst call, the one every sailor dreaded, always seemed to come at midnight. All hands, reef the foresail. That meant both watches. The men on deck, already stiff and frozen, would stagger to the base of the rigging, and the men below, the ones trying to sleep in soaking wet hammocks, would drag themselves out and stumble toward the mast. Up they would go, into the darkness, into the ice, into the wind, and below decks, things were not much better. Scurvy set in after weeks without fresh food. Gums bled, teeth loosened, fingers and toes went black from frostbite, and sometimes had to be removed with a saw and no anesthesia, and the sun disappeared. In the far southern latitudes during certain seasons, sailors reported going weeks without seeing daylight. Just howling wind and freezing spray, and the constant, sickening roll of a wooden hull that felt less like a ship and more like a coffin that had not yet decided to close. The psychological toll was enormous. Men went quiet, men stopped eating, men stared at the water and had to be pulled back from the rail. And then there is the story of the San Telmo. This is the one that stays with you. In 1819, a Spanish warship called the San Telmo set sail from Buenos Aires under the command of Captain Joaquin de Toledo. According to historical records, the San Telmo was a 74 gunship of the line, built in 1787. It was nearly 2/3 the length of a football field and over 50 feet wide. She carried 24-pound guns on her upper deck and 18-pound guns on the lower. She was carrying 644 men, officers, sailors, and Marines, all headed for Peru to reinforce Spanish colonial forces fighting the independence movements in South America. To get there, they had to cross the Drake. The San Telmo was part of a larger squadron, but somewhere in the Drake Passage, she fell behind. The storms dismasted her. The waves battered her hull. According to Spanish naval records, the San Telmo was last seen on September 2nd, 1819, near the easternmost point of the South Shetland Islands. The rest of the squadron could see her in the distance. They could see she was badly damaged. Her masts were gone. Her hull was compromised. But they could not help her. In those seas, turning back for another ship was a death sentence for your own. So they watched. And then the rain and the spray in the distance swallowed her, and she was gone. All 644 men, gone. For decades, the fate of the San Telmo was a mystery. Then wreckage, consistent with the ship, was eventually discovered on Livingston Island in the South Shetland Islands, on the Antarctic continental shelf. Spars, booms, and wooden debris washed ashore on the ice. An Argentine expedition in 1960 found additional remains, and here's the detail that haunts historians to this day. If any of those 644 men somehow survived the sinking, if any of them crawled onto the ice of Livingston Island, broken and hypothermic and alone, they would have been among the first human beings to ever set foot on any part of Antarctica. Not as explorers, not as conquerors, as castaways, dying on a frozen shore that no one in the world even knew existed. No fire, no shelter, no way to signal for help. No one came for them. No one even knew where to look. The Drake took the San Telmo and told the story in the only way it knows how. In silence. Now I want you to think about what is beneath the surface of the Drake Passage right now. Not the waves, not the current. Beneath all of that, 11,000 feet below the surface, in water that hovers just above freezing, there is a world that almost no one has ever seen. The abyssal plain at the bottom of the Drake is one of the most remote places on the planet. It is a landscape of total darkness, crushing pressure, near zero temperatures. No sunlight has touched that seafloor in the entire history of the human species. Scattered across that floor, preserved by the cold in ways that warmer oceans never allow, are the remains of centuries of human ambition. There are wooden galleons from the age of exploration, their timbers darkened, but still holding shape in the freezing water. There are iron-hulled clippers from the 19th century, their rivets rusted, but their frames still recognizable. There are steel freighters from the 20th century, sitting upright on the silt as if someone just stepped away and forgot to come back. The cold preserves everything. In warmer waters, a wooden ship would be consumed by marine organisms within decades. Down here, wood can last for centuries. Metal corrodes slowly. The personal effects of sailors, their boots, their buttons, their pocket watches stopped at the moment the water reached them, are likely still there, resting in the silt next to the bones of the men who wore them. No one has gone down to look. The depth, the pressure, and the currents make salvage or exploration virtually impossible with current technology. These ships are as unreachable as if they were on another planet. 800 of them, by some estimates. A fleet of ghosts arranged across the bottom of the Drake like a graveyard with no headstones and no visitors. And here is what makes it truly haunting. If your engines fail in the Drake Passage, there is no quick rescue. There is no Coast Guard station 10 miles away. There is no helicopter that can reach you in 30 minutes. The nearest major port is Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city in the world. Even Ushuaia can be days away depending on the sea state. The Antarctic research stations are staffed by skeleton crews, not search and rescue teams. The nearest real population centers in Chile or Argentina are over 500 miles to the north. If the Drake decides to take your ship, the ocean has time. It has all the time in the world. This is the isolation that makes the Drake Passage fundamentally different from any other dangerous body of water on Earth. The North Sea is rough, but it is surrounded by coastlines and rescue infrastructure. The Gulf of Alaska is violent, but there are ports within reach. The Drake Passage has none of that. South of you is Antarctica, a continent with no permanent population and no port facilities. North of you is the tip of South America, hundreds of miles away across the same water that is trying to kill you. East and west of you is nothing. Just the endless loop of the Antarctic circumpolar current, circling the bottom of the planet the way it has been circling for longer than human beings have existed as a species. According to geological research, the Drake Passage opened somewhere between 17 and 49 million years ago, when the tectonic plates carrying South America and Antarctica finally separated. The moment that gap appeared, the Antarctic circumpolar current began to flow, and it has not stopped since. Not for a single second. Not during the Ice Ages, when glaciers covered half of North America. Not during any of the 5 mass extinctions that have reshaped life on this planet. The Antarctic circumpolar current is one of the primary drivers of global ocean circulation. It keeps warm water away from Antarctica, which is why Antarctica has an ice sheet in the first place. The Drake Passage is not just a dangerous place to sail, it is one of the engines that drives the planet's climate. And it does not have an off switch. For tens of millions of years, this current has been running, accelerating through this bottleneck, building waves, swallowing anything that drifts into its path. Human beings have been sailing through it for roughly 500 years. That is a blink. In the timescale of the Drake Passage, our entire species is a rounding error. The Drake Passage was here long before us. It will be here long after every ship we have ever built has rusted into dust and settled onto the seafloor to join the others. And every vessel that crosses it, whether it is a 16th century galleon or a 21st century expedition cruiser with an ice-class hull and satellite navigation, is making the same bet. The same ancient, unchanged, non-negotiable bet that the water will let them pass. Today, roughly 100,000 tourists cross the Drake Passage every season on their way to see Antarctica. According to tourism industry data, that number has grown tenfold since 1992. About 70% of them experience what veteran travelers call a Drake Lake, relatively calm conditions with manageable swells. The other 30% get the Drake Shake, and a small number, a very small number, get something worse. Something that shatters the glass. Something that snaps the steel. Something that kills. Something that reminds everyone on board that all of our technology, all of our engineering, all of our confidence, all of our regulations is just a thin shell of human ambition floating on top of something that has been untamable for 50 million years. 800 ships rest on the bottom of the Drake Passage. Their crews never made it home. Their names are scattered across maritime records in a dozen languages, in a dozen countries, across 5 centuries. Some of them were explorers. Some of them were merchants. Some of them were soldiers who never reached their war. Some of them were passengers who just wanted to see the penguins. And all of them, in their final moments, learned the same truth. Nature does not negotiate. The Drake Passage does not care about our steel. It does not care about our glass, our radar, our satellite systems, or our maritime regulations. It does not care about our schedules or our engineering standards. It remains today exactly as it was when Francisco de Joses stumbled into it 500 years ago. Exactly as it was a million years before that, and a million years before that, untamable, unforgiving, and waiting.